Those who know me even a little know that I am not the poster child for rest. My genetic makeup is to be productive and to keep checking things off an ever-filling to-do list. That's my default. My last nap is months in the rearview mirror, and before that, maybe even years. But I've also been coming to recognize the importance of rest, not just to refuel for more productivity, but rest as its own kind of special, unique, good thing, a portal, a spiritual practice, something God did after 6 successful days of creating. Said, the 7th day now, day of rest. Unless I'm on vacation, I pretty much never set aside a whole day for rest. I might intend to, but there is something in me like that Jack in the Box, that just pops up. Oh, I want to go do that. Yeah, right. It's just a thing. I typically act as if rest is a reward for hard work or something to do when I'm too tired to do something else. So this is an aspirational sermon, and as people say, preachers preach to themselves. So it's a little personal nudge, but perhaps a gentle reminder to some of you as well, or perhaps a confirmation for others who have that rhythm of rest built into your lifestyle already. Well, what brought this to mind to talk about today is 3 things: a musician, an author, and a bird. The musician Julian Davis led a retreat day that I attended a couple months ago on the theme of rest notes. Those of you who know something about music know that rest notes are the pauses in a musical score, the place where the melody stops for a measure or 2 or 3 before it picks up again. This silent moment is not there so the singer can breathe or the pianist can rest her hands. The rest note, this pause, is part of the music. It's written in by the composer. It's not a separate thing. Despite 6 years of piano lessons, Julian told this in a way that I just hadn't thought about before. In our 24-hour days, we need a decent nightly rest note of silence and non-intending when parts of us slow down, like our planning, our fixing, our talking, our website scrolling, and then other parts, like our imagination, become quite active. After a good night's sleep, we wake refreshed, renewed. Our hearts are more at rest as we move into the day, our energy and clarity restored. Julian, the musician and retreat leader, talked about rest as not just a nightly necessity, but as something for us to engage in during the day on purpose. Last weekend, as I said, I was visiting my son in Kentucky and his girlfriend, and we drove to Indiana for the Indy 500, which we watched along with 357,000 other spectators. Now, when a car malfunctions or crashes, there's a yellow flag that goes up and all the cars slow way down immediately. A white pacer car comes to the front of the line to keep cars moving at that slow pace. And it's not an opportunity for people to pass or bump into each other. They have to stay in line at exactly that pace, the distance that they were when the accident happened. Now, once the injured vehicle and the very disappointed driver are off the track, the green flag goes up and whew, they shoot out at 200 miles an hour again. Sometimes you and I have a relatively minor life malfunction, and we just need to slow down and pace ourselves. Or we'll burn out, or the malfunction won't clear. The slowing down could mean taking a nap, simply sitting down to think, or not to think, or standing at the window for a few minutes, staring out at the bird feeder. It might be just that, just a pause before rushing on to the next thing. In hymns and other music, in addition to rest notes, there are half notes and whole notes, when the sound of the note or the chord is just held a little longer before it changes. I was noticing that in our first hymn this morning, rest notes and whole notes and half notes. Sometimes we wonder how the singer can hold their breath for that long on that high note or at the end of the song. But it's not an accident. The composer wrote it that way so the singer and the listeners can restfully savor that spacious sound. Perhaps a rest note for us is pausing to pat a fern frond, feeling its soft greenness soothe our fingers. That's actually a favorite thing of mine to do. Perhaps it's pulling over to marvel at the clouds, at their very whitely mashed potato-ness. Or perhaps we begin our day with restful intention, saying, God, show me what love looks like today, who I might call or pray for or email or text to let them know I'm thinking about them and that I'm grateful for them in my life. God, remind me that I have time for loving gestures that are not on the to-do list. Reveal them to me, God, as we go through this day together. That's kind of a recently added morning prayer on my part. So a question, do you and I frequently remember that God's DNA is in us, that God's nature in us, built in, is love? Do we exhale slowly, taking in once again that we are enough just as we are, that we are allowed, even invited, to lie down in green pastures, as Psalm 23 says, so God can restore our souls? Do we pause to regroup, reground when things have gone off the rails and we're just so irritated? Do we pause to remember that the only thing that really matters is the spirit of love, not what we do or how much of it we do? Yes, faith without works is dead, but if what we do is not fueled by love, love fueled by rest, then according to 1 Corinthians 13, our doing is a noisy gong or a clashing cymbal, or in our world we might say the screech of a microphone, or the irritating sound of static. We know in our experience, not just because it says this in 1 Corinthians 13, we know this is true. Well, maybe it's not that our works are worthless, but worth less if love is not the spirit in which we do those things. The retreat leader, Julian, also told us about something called the NAP ministry, led by the author and seminary-trained theologian poet Tricia Hersey, and that's Hersey, not Hershey. I happened to hear her give a talk for the first time soon after that retreat day. And of course, I had to get her book entitled Rest as Resistance. She's the writer I mentioned who led to my talking about this theme today. Like Julian, Tricia is an African American. She writes about how capitalism was built on the backs of her ancestors. Slaves had to find ways to survive the systemic oppression, which was robbing the life right out of them. Daydreaming, prayer, creating community, imagining a different future, singing about freedom were among the ways they rested from the grind of the crushing work at the hands of cruel racist masters. Harriet Tubman, who guided many slaves on the Underground Railway, listened to the sounds of owls, was in tune with the stars, and connected to nature. Tricia Hersey writes, I like to envision that Harriet Tubman never was caught by the police while on her freedom journey because she paused, she listened, she prayed. Tricia Hersey herself came from what she describes as a legacy of exhaustion. Her grandmother, Ora, raised 8 children in the Jim Crow era of terror and rested her eyes 30 minutes every day, sitting on her plastic-covered yellow couch in an attempt to connect and find peace. Ora's mother, so Trisha's great-grandmother, sat up every night with a pistol on her lap on her Mississippi farm, in her apron pocket, on their deep Mississippi farm to creatively deal with any mischief the KKK might come up with. Hershey says that together we need to resist what she calls the grind culture, the systemic oppression of capitalism, which insists on always doing more, earning more, having more, which views rest as lazy, indulgent, a waste of time, something shameful or even risky. The book jacket says, "What would it be like to live in a well-rested world?" Far too many of us have claimed productivity as the cornerstone of success. Brainwashed by capitalism, we subject our bodies and minds to work at an unrealistic, damaging, and machine-level pace, feeding the same engine that enslaved millions into brutal labor for its own relentless benefit. Hersey preaches that rest must become our foundation, that rest is a divine right. It's not just an optional treat or an occasional luxury or the means to further ramp up our productivity. Rest needs to be part of the rhythm and the melody of each day, not just each night. A pleasure, an opportunity in its own right. But what does Hersey mean by rest? Well, because each of us is unique, she doesn't offer a recipe or 10 easy steps to being restful. Creating a lifestyle that prioritizes rest may mean for you something different than for me. Maybe making time to listen to music or play music or write music. Daydreaming while looking out the window. Closing our eyes for a few minutes and just sitting, praying or meditating. Taking a break to unplug from social media or emails or podcasts or apps or the news about the news. Laying on the grass, slow walking in a meadow, resting on a hammock, napping on a beach, sitting by a stream, playing with a child, or curling up with a pillow and a blanket at a nap event, like the hundreds of these group nap sessions Hersey has led around the country over the last 4 or 5 years, where dozens and dozens of perfect strangers show up to rest on a rug with quiet music playing, or to rest in a park together, lulled by the sounds of nature. As I mentioned, what informed this sermon today was a musician, Julian, an author, Trisha, and a bird. A bird, yes, a mother bird. A robin I came nearly eye to eye with when I opened the bathroom window curtain. I wanted to check on an overly zealous weed that had snaked its way up the outside wall and was interested in covering the window. I thought, well, maybe if I open this window, I can peel it off and drop it down. Well, there she was when I opened that curtain. A queen robin on her throne of twigs, incubating, as it turned out, when she took a quick break to stretch her wings. I could see 4 of the most lovely robin's egg blue eggs. As we startled each other and then gazed at each other, she, a bit warily, understandably, I marveled at her patience, her devotion, her assurance that just resting atop these eggs, however long it took, was more than enough. I told her she was just the best mom, doing just the best job of sitting there. Another delight of spring, of course, is the first green shoots that push through the dirt to hatch hyacinths and crocuses and daffodils that had rested in bulbs for 11 months. As our closing song says, in the cold and dead of winter, there's a spring that waits to be, unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see. Rest is part of the DNA of nature, and it is also a given in our human cycle of creativity, pleasure, imagination, and renewal. Rest is a theme in our scripture lesson, though not usually the one that we focus on. The story is usually referred to as the Samaritan woman or the woman at the well. But this morning, I'm thinking of the story as the story of an exhausted man and exhausted woman, both desperately needing water from each other. The man is Jesus, tired from walking all morning, perhaps having started the journey before dawn, just to beat the heat. But the journey wasn't over. He was too tired to go with his disciples to buy lunch in the town. He sat down by the well, hoping against hope that someone would come with a bucket. He knew the village women would have already done this water-fetching, chatting chore early in the morning, but still, maybe someone would come. It was now noon, it was hot, and had there been any trees, he would have been in the shade, rather than resting with his back against the well wall. He was thirsty, oh, so thirsty. And to his relief, someone did come, a woman, alone, with a jug. Perhaps she had to fetch water at this inconvenient time, having been cast out of the group of women. She was thirsty too, differently thirsty, for a way to make her life better. And so a conversation took place between them about water. Jesus needed a long, cool drink, but the woman hesitated. As a Jew, he was not even to touch a cup used by Samaritans. Jesus intuited things about this woman's situation. He sensed her need for the kind of water only God can give. In his characteristic way of teaching, Jesus used a sort of bodily human truth to illustrate a spiritual truth. He told her, "There is an inner life-giving spring of God water that never runs dry." The woman, though confused, was all in, hoping that she wouldn't have to keep doing this daily grind of fetching water at the well in the midday, a reminder of her loneliness and perhaps her ostracism. As the story continues beyond where our scripture lesson left off, we learn that her life had been complicated. She was living with a man who was not her husband. In fact, she'd had 4 husbands already. Perhaps this was why she might have been shunned by other women. Her spirit was dehydrated. Her heart was restless. Her life was complicated. What comes to mind when you remember being really thirsty, dehydrated at some point along the way? I think we can become fixated on needing something, anything to drink. And after a while, we may feel dizzy, confused, experience a drop in our energy, and maybe even the fear of passing out. My first symptom when I'm very thirsty is restlessness and irritability. And I'm always stunned by the relief my body and spirit experience, like a sponge just absorbing water. It's like the cells of the body are taking it in immediately. Is that familiar to you, how quickly a little bit of water makes a difference? In fact, I'm reminded I could really use this at this moment. But here's a hint. You should never be behind me at a drinking fountain, because I have a weird habit, lifelong, of taking 11 sips. Exactly 11. By now you may be wondering, where is Nancy going? What does quenching our thirst have to do with restless or restful hearts? Well, here's my point. We need rest like we need water every day, not just after a dusty hike in the hot sun like Jesus. And like the Samaritan woman, we also long for the quenching that only comes from a deeper source of water. We need to be rested in body and soul, hydrated in body and soul. The writer of Psalm 42, living in exile, was taunted for his faith by people around him. He had moments of severe doubt that God had his back. The psalmist described his intense spiritual dehydration with this image. As a deer pants for streams of cool water, so I long for you, God. I thirst for you, the living God. This is echoed in the famous quote from the Confessions written by St. Augustine 400 years after Christ. Augustine wrote, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." This spiritual wisdom from Augustine is a bit surprising given his background. Wikipedia says Augustine was a notoriously rebellious Catholic teenager born in Africa who cohabited with a girlfriend, joined an exotic Eastern cult, and ran away from his mother. But Augustine became a brilliant and renowned teacher of public speaking and was appointed by the Roman emperor to teach in Milan, Italy. Now, while in Italy, he chanced to hear a sermon by the Bishop of Milan and was baptized by him. Augustine renounced his secular career. He left his mistress. He became a monk, then a priest, and then a bishop of the small North African town of Hippo. He was known as the greatest teacher in the Western Christian Church for 800 years until St. Thomas Aquinas came on the scene in about 1200. Hear it again. You have made us for yourself, O God, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. Taking time for rest notes, for a rhythm of rest in our day as advised by Julian Davis and Tricia Hershey, are ways we soothe and fill our restless hearts. We are built for and long for access to God's creative, clarifying, soul-quenching, life-giving water. But we don't have to fetch it somewhere. It's already in us. It is God's DNA, the gift of God's ever-present presence inside us and with us. Our sense of panting, our thirst for something more, is not a sign of failure, of not having or being or producing enough. It is just homesickness for God. Restlessness is an invitation to pause, to slow down, to pace ourselves, to rest beside still waters, or be in the company of nature, or lean into a song or count our blessings. God is in it all and in us through it all. Inevitably, we will experience restlessness and thirst in our lives as humans, but we can make choices which return us to the loving restfulness which is our birthright. Thanks be to God.